Long before cities, before writing, before kings, and even before true civilization, something extraordinary was happening inside the minds of our ancient ancestors. In a world of predators, firelight, hunger, shifting climates, and vanished human species, the modern human mind was slowly being born. This is not the story of one invention or one sudden awakening, but a prehistoric journey millions of years in the making. Before we go deeper, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. If this is the kind of history and mystery you enjoy, now, let's return to the dangerous ancient world that shaped the way we think, remember, imagine, and survive. Long before any city rises, before a field is planted, before a name is carved into stone, something is moving through the pale grass at the edge of an ancient African lake. The air is hot, but not empty. It carries the smell of wet mud, cracked reeds, animal dung, old bones, and distant rain that may or may not arrive. A group of early humans crosses the open ground carefully, not as the strongest creatures in the landscape, not as the fastest, not even as the most frightening. Around them are cats with shearing teeth, hyenas that can break bone, crocodiles half buried in brown water, eagles watching from dead branches, and herds that shift like living weather across the plain. Nothing here promises survival, yet inside these vulnerable bodies, something strange is beginning to gather attention. Memory, fear, patience, cooperation, the slow architecture of a mind that one day will paint animals in caves, bury the dead, speak across generations, measure the stars, and ask where it came from. The modern human mind does not appear suddenly, like a lamp being lit in a dark room. It is not born in one invention, one migration, one mutation, or one moment of revelation. It forms across immense time, under pressure from hunger, danger, weather, distance, childbirth, childhood, firelight, stone, blood, and social life. What survives in the record suggests a journey so long that most of it leaves no words behind. There are no diaries from the first toolmakers, no songs preserved from the first families who waited out the night beside a flame, no clear testimony from the people who first understood that a mark could stand for a memory. Instead, there are fragments, bones with altered shapes, stones struck by deliberate hands, ash in ancient sediment, pigments carried far from their source, footprints hardened in mud, shells pierced for wearing, and skulls whose inner spaces hint at brains changing over hundreds of thousands of years. Before we go deeper, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, if this is the kind of history and mystery you enjoy. Because this story is not only about the distant past, it is about the hidden prehistory inside every ordinary human thought, the ability to imagine tomorrow, to sense another person's mood, to learn from someone long dead, to fear what has not yet happened, to see meaning in a pattern of marks, or to sit quietly under the night sky and feel that the world contains more than the eye can measure. At the beginning of this journey, the world is not stable. Forests spread and retreat, lakes expand, shrink, vanish, and return. Grasslands open where wooded habitats once stood. Volcanic dust settles over plains where animals feed. Rivers shift their courses, leaving bones in old channels and footprints in drying mud. Early members of the human lineage live inside these changes, and they do not have the luxury of controlling them. They must notice. A mind that fails to notice the movement of clouds, the mood of a herd, the alarm call of another animal, the ripeness of fruit, or the fresh track of a predator may vanish without leaving a trace. In this sense, thought begins not as philosophy, but as survival. The earliest foundations of human awareness are older than Homo sapiens, older than language as it is known today, older than art, older than ritual, older even than the bodies that would eventually look recognizably modern. They belong to creatures standing somewhere between ape and human, living in landscapes where opportunity and danger are often the same thing. A carcass might mean food, but it might also mean lions are near. A new water source might save a group, but it might also draw predators. A stone might be just a stone, or it might become an edge. This ability to hold more than one possibility in mind may seem simple now, but it marks one of the quiet thresholds in the making of humanity. Scholars still debate how much of this early mental world can truly be reconstructed. Brain tissue does not fossilize, thoughts leave no bones, even skull shape only gives indirect clues, and behavior can be difficult to read from scattered objects in ancient sediment. A broken stone may be natural, or it may be intentional. A concentration of bones may be the result of hunting, scavenging, flood movement, or predator activity. The evidence remains incomplete, and no single explanation fully accounts for the rise of the human mind. Yet the pattern is hard to ignore. Over time, early humans become better at extracting meaning from unstable surroundings. They do not simply react. They begin to anticipate. Anticipation changes everything. To anticipate is to live partly outside the present. It means remembering where water lasted during a dry season. It means knowing which trees bear fruit at a certain time. It means recognizing that vultures circling in the distance may point toward meat. It means seeing a stone not only as it is, but as what it could become after a few careful blows. It means watching another member of the group and sensing whether they are afraid, angry, tired, or likely to help. The mind stretches forward and backward, binding memory to possibility. Somewhere in that stretch, the ancient animal becomes something stranger. But the journey is not graceful. It is marked by loss. Many human relatives disappear. Many experiments in body and behavior end without descendants. Some populations survive for thousands of generations and then fade into the record as a jawbone, a tooth, a skull fragment, a few tools beneath volcanic ash. The modern mind is not the inevitable winner of a clean race. It is the result of a tangled and dangerous history, full of vanished paths. For most of prehistory, there is no guarantee that anything like us will exist. Imagine a small group pausing near the edge of evening. The light lowers. The world changes its rules. Day animals withdraw. Night hunters begin to move. Young individuals stay close to older ones. Someone has learned where the safer ground lies. Someone remembers the sound that means danger. Someone watches the others watching. A body leans toward another body, and attention becomes shared. There may be no language yet in any modern sense, but there is communication in posture, gaze, rhythm, alarm, touch, and movement. The group survives not because each individual is powerful, but because minds begin to overlap. That overlap may be one of the deepest roots of human intelligence. A solitary creature can be clever, but a social creature must manage a more difficult world. It must track alliances, recognize kin, learn from elders, tolerate rivals, care for dependent young, and sometimes restrain impulse for the sake of belonging. In early human groups, survival is not only a contest against climate and predators. It is a constant negotiation with other minds. The animal outside the group may kill you, but the group itself may save you. To remain inside it, one must read signals, remember debts, detect deception, offer help, and understand attention. Long before philosophy, the mind is already studying minds. This is where the story becomes especially mysterious, because the most important changes may have happened in ways that leave almost nothing behind. A gesture repeated often enough can become a shared sign, but gestures vanish. A mother showing a child how to crack a nut leaves no direct fossil of the lesson. A group remembering a seasonal route leaves only scattered traces of movement. A warning call, a comforting touch, a learned rhythm, a remembered face. A moment of patience before striking stone, these are the invisible events from which visible history eventually grows. Still, the landscape keeps the faintest record. Bones show bodies adapting. Teeth reveal diets shifting. Tools begin to appear, crude at first, then more consistent. Cut marks on animal bone suggest access to meat. Ancient environments show that early humans lived through cycles of abundance and stress. The mind is being trained by uncertainty, not by comfort, not by security, but by the need to connect signs before it is too late. And so, the prehistoric journey that creates the modern human mind begins not with a crown, a temple, a book, or a sudden awakening, but with small acts of attention in a dangerous world. A track in mud, a shadow in grass, a stone selected and carried, a child watching an elder's hands, a group listening in the dark. From these fragile beginnings, over immense stretches of time, the human mind begins to become a place where the world can be remembered, imagined, feared, reshaped, and finally wondered at. The first great change is not a thought, but a posture, somewhere in the deep past, long before a human hand shapes a blade fine enough to cut hide cleanly. Bodies begin to rise, the ground is uneven, the light is broken by trees and open patches of grass, and the creatures moving through it are not yet human in the modern sense. Their brains are still small compared with ours. Their faces still carry old ancestral shapes. Their arms remain useful for climbing, reaching, grasping and pulling. But their hips, knees, feet, and spines are beginning to tell a different story. They are learning, generation by generation, to balance the body over two legs, and this quiet anatomical shift changes the future of the mind. Walking upright does not instantly create intelligence, and scholars still debate exactly why bipedalism became so important in the human line. It may have helped early hominins move efficiently between scattered food sources. It may have allowed them to see over grass, carry infants, transport food, reduce exposure to direct sun, or move through a mixed landscape of woodland and open ground. No single explanation fully accounts for it, and different pressures may have mattered at different times. Yet once the body stands more often on two legs, the hands are no longer needed in the same way for movement. They are not freed completely, because early human relatives still climb and still use their arms for many tasks, but they become available for a wider range of actions. A hand can now carry, hold, sort, strike, point, comfort, threaten, and offer. This matters because hands are not merely tools attached to the body. They are organs of thought. A creature that can hold an object while moving through the world begins to connect distant moments. A stone picked up in one place can be used somewhere else. A piece of food can be carried back toward others. A child can be held while the group moves. A branch, a bone, a tuber, a shell, a lump of pigment, or a sharp flake can become part of a plan that extends beyond the immediate second. The mind does not need language to begin making these connections. It needs memory, attention, and the bodily experience of acting on objects. The human hand, with its sensitive fingertips and powerful thumb, becomes one of the great silent engines of mental evolution. Even before the most refined tools appear, grasping and manipulating objects demand a kind of practical imagination. The hand explores shape, weight, resistance, texture, and force. It learns that one stone breaks differently from another, that a hard object can crack a shell, that a stick can reach where fingers cannot, that a carried item can solve a future problem. Each discovery is small, but small discoveries repeated across thousands of generations become a new relationship with the world. The environment is no longer only something endured, it is something that can be handled. At the same time, upright walking alters the way early humans see. Eyes lifted higher from the ground can scan farther across open spaces. A body balanced on two legs can pause, look, turn, and judge distance differently. Vision becomes tied to anticipation. A patch of shade may hide danger. A dark line on the horizon may mean trees, water, or moving animals. The ability to notice from a distance does not guarantee safety, but it gives the mind more time to prepare. In a landscape where seconds can decide life or death, a little more warning may be enough. The cost is severe. Bipedal bodies are compromises, not perfect designs. The spine must curve, the pelvis must reshape, the knees and feet must carry new burdens. Childbirth becomes more difficult as the pelvis changes and brains later expand. Infants are born helpless, and mothers pay a high price for the evolutionary path that eventually produces larger minds. The evidence remains incomplete, but what survives in bones suggests that the human body is not a cleanly engineered machine. It is a history of trade-offs. Upright walking opens possibilities, but it also leaves pain, vulnerability, and dependence in its wake. The modern human mind grows from this uneasy bargain. There is another consequence, less obvious but deeply important. Once hands and faces are visible in new ways during movement, communication changes. A standing body can gesture more clearly. Arms can signal direction. Hands can display objects. Faces can be watched while bodies move together. A look, a reach, a pause, or a pointing movement may begin as simple behavior, but in a social group it can become shared attention. One individual sees something, another notices that seeing. A third follows the gaze. This ability to align minds toward the same object is one of the quiet foundations of human culture. It is easy to underestimate shared attention because it feels effortless now. A person points, and another person looks. A parent glances toward danger, and a child learns to track the glance. A group turns toward a sound, and each member understands that others have noticed it too. But this is not a trivial mental act. It requires the awareness that another being has a focus of attention separate from one's own. It allows knowledge to move between bodies without being physically passed from hand to hand. Before words, attention itself becomes a bridge. Early upright walkers do not yet possess the full symbolic world of later humans. They are not planning cities or painting cave walls, but their bodies are preparing the stage on which those later achievements become possible. Their hands can carry and shape. Their eyes can scan and coordinate. Their group life can become more visually expressive. Their children can watch actions repeated in front of them. The mind is not evolving alone inside the skull. It is evolving through posture, movement, touch, balance, and imitation. A lesser-known detail in this long transformation is how early footprints can reveal behavior that bones alone cannot. Fossilized trackways preserve bodies in motion, stride length, foot shape, direction, sometimes even the presence of more than one individual moving across wet ground before ash or sediment seals the surface. Such tracks do not tell us what the walkers thought, but they remind us that evolution happened in moving lives, not museum drawers. These beings crossed landscapes, shifted weight, avoided obstacles, followed companions, and left momentary pressure marks that hardened into deep time. From the outside, the shift to upright walking may seem like a mechanical change. A spine adjusts, a pelvis broadens, a foot stiffens. But beneath those bones lies a widening mental world. The hand becomes a memory device, the eye becomes a distant scout, the body becomes a signalling surface, movement becomes planning, a carried object becomes a future action waiting to happen. Step by step, the ancestors of humanity are drawn into a new kind of existence, one in which survival depends not only on reacting to the world, but on holding possibilities in the mind before they arrive. A hand that can carry is only the beginning. The deeper transformation comes when a hand learns to strike with purpose, somewhere on an ancient shore, beside a river channel, or on a dry plain where raw stone lies exposed. An early human ancestor lifts one rock and brings it down against another. The sound is brief, sharp, almost ordinary. To any passing animal it means nothing, but in that impact, something more than force is being released. A stone breaks, an edge appears. And the world has changed. Not in a grand way, not in a way visible from the sky, but in the private space between intention and result. For the first time preserved clearly in the archaeological record, the mind is not only using what it finds, it is making what it needs. The oldest known stone tools are simple to the eye, but they are not simple in what they imply. A rounded cobble is struck so that flakes come away. Those flakes can cut hide, scrape flesh, slice plant material, or open possibilities that teeth and nails alone cannot manage. The toolmaker must choose a suitable stone, hold it at a useful angle, deliver a controlled blow, and understand, at least through practice, how stone fractures. This does not require modern language or modern symbolic thought, but it does require more than random smashing. It requires attention to sequence. It requires memory of previous attempts. It requires the body to learn a relationship between gesture, material, and outcome. What survives in the record suggests that early toolmaking is one of the first visible signs of planning in the human story. A sharp flake is not food by itself. It is a means to reach food. It is a bridge between present action and future reward. That difference matters. An animal can use an object in the moment, and many creatures do. Chimpanzees crack nuts. Crows bend twigs. Sea otters use stones. And the boundary between humans and other tool-using animals is not as clean as older stories once imagined. But early hominin stone tools reveal something unusually durable, repeated manufacture across landscapes and generations. The behavior is not a single clever accident. It becomes a tradition. The earliest toolmakers do not leave behind instructions, but the stones themselves preserve a kind of silent grammar. Archaeologists can read scars on a core, the direction of blows, the angle of removal, the choice of raw material, and the repeated patterns of flake production. Some stones are carried away from their source, which means the maker or user recognizes value beyond the immediate location. A useful rock might be worth transporting. A sharp edge might be worth saving. Even a crude tool can turn into a stored possibility. In this way, stone becomes an extension of memory. There is a surprising intimacy in these objects. A tool held today may still fit the hand in a way that makes the maker's gesture almost imaginable. The thumb braces here. The fingers curl there. The striking platform sits at a certain angle. A blow lands, and the flake detaches. Across more than 2 million years, one can sometimes sense the rhythm of a vanished body through the stone it broke. Yet scholars still debate exactly what these early toolmakers understood. Did they imagine the finished form before striking? Did they teach one another deliberately? Or did younger individuals learn mostly by watching? How much was conscious planning, and how much was skilled habit built by repetition? The evidence remains incomplete because the crucial events happened in brains, hands, and social moments that do not fossilize. Still, even skilled habit is not trivial. To make a stone tool, the body must coordinate perception and action with unusual precision. Too much force, and the stone shatters badly. Too little, and nothing useful happens. The wrong angle produces a dull fragment. The right angle creates an edge fine enough to cut. Over time, this teaches the mind to expect invisible properties inside matter. The stone contains possible shapes, but only certain actions can reveal them. That idea, however practical and unspoken, is profound. It is the beginning of seeing nature not only as surface, but as potential. The consequences reach into diet and social life. With sharp flakes, early humans can access meat more effectively, whether by scavenging, hunting small animals, processing carcasses left by predators, or cutting through tough tissues before other scavengers arrive. Cut marks on fossil bones show that stone edges met animal bodies in deep prehistory, though the exact balance between hunting and scavenging is still debated. Meat and marrow provide dense calories. They may support larger bodies and, eventually, expanding brains, though no single explanation fully accounts for brain growth. Tools do not create intelligence alone. but they feed into a cycle better tools open new foods. New foods support energetic demands, and more capable minds improve tool use. There is also the matter of teaching. A stone tool tradition cannot last if every generation begins from nothing. Young individuals must watch, imitate, practice, and fail. They must see that the elder is not merely hitting rocks, but doing something with direction. A mistake becomes information. A good flake becomes a model. Perhaps there are gestures, calls, pauses, or demonstrations. Perhaps a skilled maker slows the action near a learner, though this cannot be proven for the earliest periods. What survives in the record suggests that culture, in its most practical form, is already beginning to accumulate. Knowledge is no longer trapped inside one lifetime. It can pass from body to body through attention. This passing on may be one of the hidden revolutions of prehistory. A brain can learn from personal experience, but a cultural mind can inherit the experience of others. A young toolmaker does not need to rediscover every useful angle alone. The group preserves patterns. The landscape becomes marked by remembered stone sources, butchery places, safe routes, and habitual movements. Intelligence is no longer only individual cleverness. It becomes distributed across a community, across objects, across places revisited again and again. As stone tool traditions become more refined, the mental demands grow. Later hand axes, for example, require more extended shaping, symmetry, and control. Some are so carefully made that they seem to exceed immediate practical need, though interpretations vary. They may reflect skill, efficiency, display, tradition, or all of these at once. The important point is not that early humans suddenly become artists. It is that their actions become increasingly organized across time. A tool is imagined through stages. A mistake early in the sequence can ruin what comes later. The maker must hold a process in mind. This is where the prehistoric journey deepens. Upright walking frees the hands, but tools train the mind to live inside sequences. Strike, turn, strike again, carry, cut, share. Remember, select the stone before the need becomes urgent. Preserve an edge for a task not yet begun. Each act pulls thought farther from the immediate present. The world becomes filled with delayed meanings, this stone for later, this carcass for sharing, this place for returning, this gesture for learning. In the broken surfaces of ancient tools, one can see the first durable outline of a mind beginning to plan beyond the moment, and once that habit takes root, the path toward firelight, language, art, and memory becomes harder to turn back. The first flame in human hands is not just warmth. It is a border drawn against the dark. Imagine the landscape after sunset, when the open ground loses its color and every sound becomes larger than its source. The grass moves without explanation. Branches crack beyond sight. Eyes shine briefly and vanish. For most animals, night belongs to caution, hiding, and the ancient arithmetic of predator and prey. But somewhere in deep prehistory, early humans begin to gather around fire, and the hours after sunset slowly change their meaning. Darkness is no longer only a threat pressing inward. It becomes a space that can be held back, shaped, watched, and shared. Fire is difficult to trace because it destroys as it transforms. Ash scatters, charcoal decays, wind and water disturb ancient surfaces, and burned earth can be hard to distinguish from natural wildfire unless the context is clear. Scholars still debate when humans first controlled fire regularly, and the evidence remains incomplete. Some early sites suggest possible fire use far back in the human story, while more secure and repeated evidence appears later. But whenever habitual control truly takes hold, its consequences are immense. Fire changes food, safety, time, movement, social life, and perhaps the emotional architecture of the human mind. At its simplest, fire makes heat. That alone matters. A group with reliable fire can endure colder nights, occupy places that would otherwise be harsher, and sit together when the air turns sharp. But heat is only the surface of the transformation. Fire also changes food, meat cooks, tubers soften, tough plants become easier to chew. Some toxins are reduced. More calories may become available from the same material, and digestion can become less costly. The exact role of cooking in the evolution of the human body is still debated, especially the timing. But the larger principle is clear: a cooked world is not the same as a raw one. Fire begins to do part of the body's work outside the body. This has strange implications for the mind. Food no longer belongs only to the moment of finding and eating. It can be processed, delayed, gathered near a hearth, divided, watched, guarded, and shared under social rules. Cooking creates waiting. Waiting creates interaction. A carcass or a pile of roots near a fire becomes a focus of attention, desire, patience, and negotiation. Who eats first? Who receives a portion? Who tends the flame? Who brings fuel? Who stays close to the children? Who remembers where dry wood can be found after rain? These are practical matters. But practical matters become social patterns. Around fire, survival becomes more organized. Fire also extends the day. This may be one of its most important gifts. Before controlled flame, sunset narrows activity. After fire, the group can remain awake in a pool of light while the world beyond remains dangerous. Faces become visible after dark. Hands can continue working. Tools can be repaired. Food can be processed. Children can observe adults for longer stretches of time. The group can sit, listen, gesture, and remember while predators remain at the edge of illumination. The night becomes inhabited by human attention. There is a lesser-known detail in this transformation. Fire is not a single invention but a continuing relationship. A flame must be fed. It must be protected from rain and wind. Embers must be preserved or rekindled. Fuel must be chosen, collected, carried, and sometimes stored. Different woods burn differently. Damp material smokes. Dry grass flares and disappears. A good fire requires knowledge of landscape, weather, material, and timing. It is a living process that punishes neglect. Intending it, early humans may have practiced a kind of extended responsibility, unlike almost anything else in their daily lives. The flame exists now, but its survival depends on actions taken for the near future. This kind of attention trains the mind in continuity. The fire that warms the group tonight must be prepared before night arrives. The fuel used now must have been gathered earlier. The ember saved from one place can start another fire later. The mind begins to link morning work to evening safety, dry wood to future heat, a small coal to tomorrow's meal. Fire turns time into a chain of dependencies. It rewards foresight. It also changes fear. Fire does not remove danger, but it reorganizes it. Predators may still approach. Smoke may irritate lungs. Burns can injure skin. Wildfire can escape control. A sleeping group too close to flame may suffer. No single explanation should romanticize fire as pure comfort. Yet the psychological effect of a controlled hearth is hard to overstate. The circle of light gives the group a center. Outside it lies uncertainty. Inside it lies warmth, visibility, and the familiar shapes of others. The mind can loosen slightly from immediate vigilance. In that loosening, new kinds of social life may grow. What happens around those ancient fires cannot be recovered directly. No one can hear the sounds made there. No one can know when gestures became more elaborate, when vocal rhythms carried memory, when a repeated movement began to mean more than itself. But firelight creates unusual conditions for communication. Faces flicker, shadows exaggerate hands and bodies. Attention gathers naturally around the same bright point. A group facing inward can watch expressions, share food, soothe children, groom, signal, and perhaps rehearse events from the day. A hunt, a danger, a route, a quarrel, a discovery each can be acted, gestured, remembered, and understood by others. The evidence remains incomplete, but the hearth is one of the most plausible stages on which human social imagination grows. There is another consequence, quieter and more profound. Fire creates contrast. It divides the world into inside and outside, light and dark, safe and unsafe, cooked and raw, near and far. Human thought is deeply comfortable with such divisions. Later cultures will build myths, rituals, homes, temples, and stories around the symbolic power of fire. But long before symbolism becomes visible in the record, the experience itself is already shaping perception. A child raised near fire learns that nature can be transformed, that danger can be managed, that darkness can be resisted, and that a small controlled force can alter the behavior of animals, food, and people. The hearth may also intensify memory. Events that happen in strong sensory settings are easier to recall: smoke in the hair, sparks rising into black air, heat on the face, the smell of roasting meat, elders' hands moving in orange light, even without formal storytelling. Repeated evenings around flame could bind groups through shared experience. A place where fire is used again and again may become more than a campsite. It becomes a remembered centre, a point in the mental map where warmth, food, safety, and social belonging meet. By the time fire becomes a regular companion, the prehistoric mind has crossed another threshold. Upright bodies have freed the hands, stone tools have trained planning through sequence. Fire now stretches life into the night and gathers minds into a circle. It teaches care, patience, timing, transformation, and shared attention. It turns raw material into food, darkness into social space, fear into watchfulness, and scattered individuals into a group facing the same light. In that glow, the modern human mind is still far from complete, but it is learning something it will never forget: the world can be changed, and once changed, it can change the people gathered around it. Fire gathers bodies into a circle, but the circle itself may be older than the flame. Long before the hearth becomes a nightly centre, early humans already live inside a world of other minds. They are born helpless, grow slowly, depend on adults, compete with siblings, recognize familiar faces, fear strangers, follow leaders, avoid dangerous tempers, and learn who shares food when hunger sharpens the group. The landscape is full of predators, droughts, broken stone, and moving herds. But one of the most complicated landscapes is social. To survive among humans, even ancient humans, is to study attention, memory, trust, rank, affection, resentment, and obligation. The mind does not expand only because the world is harsh. It expands because other minds are difficult. A solitary animal can solve certain problems cleanly. It needs food, shelter, caution, and strength enough to continue. A group-living animal faces those problems plus a second set that never fully ends. Who can be approached safely? Who's likely to take more than they give? Who remembers an injury? Who protects a child? Who has seen water in the dry season? Who knows the old path through the hills? Who is dangerous when hungry? Who is grieving, frightened, ill, or watching too closely? These judgments are not abstract philosophy, but they demand a subtle intelligence. They require the brain to track relationships that change through time. This is one reason many researchers have argued that human intelligence grows partly from social pressure. The idea is sometimes called the social brain hypothesis, though scholars still debate how far it can explain the full story. Larger groups can create stronger demands on memory and interpretation, but group size is not everything. Ecology, diet, tool use, childhood, cooperation, and climate all matter too. No single explanation fully accounts for the expansion of the human mind. Still, the social world leaves a powerful imprint. A brain that reads others well may gain food, allies, mates, protection, and knowledge. A brain that reads others badly may be pushed aside, deceived, abandoned, or killed. For early humans, faces become landscapes of information. A glance can warn. A tightened mouth can signal anger. A relaxed posture can invite approach. A sudden stillness can mean fear before the danger is seen. Hands matter too. A hand reaching toward food is different from a hand offering it. A hand holding stone is different from a hand resting empty. A body turned away from the group may be leaving, hiding, or listening. The mind must interpret these signs quickly. And it must also understand that signs can be mistaken. The evidence remains incomplete, but what survives in living humans and other primates suggests that social interpretation has very deep roots. One of the great hidden steps toward the modern mind is the ability to share attention deliberately. It is not enough to see a thing. A human can notice that another human sees it too. A child can follow an adult's gaze toward a tool, a track, a branch, or a threat. An adult can pause long enough for the child to understand where attention should go. Over time, this creates a mental bridge. Knowledge can move through looks, gestures, demonstrations, and emotional reactions before it ever becomes spoken instruction. The group becomes a network of watching minds. Shared attention also makes cooperation possible at a higher level. A group can surround prey, defend against predators, carry food, care for injured members, or move together across difficult ground only if individuals coordinate their actions. Coordination does not require modern language in every case, but it requires timing, expectation, and trust. One hunter must understand that another is moving to cut off an animal's escape. One gatherer must recognize that another has found something worth approaching. One adult must know that a child is too close to danger. Each mind must hold not only its own action, but the likely actions of others. Trust becomes a kind of invisible technology. A sharp stone can cut, and fire can cook. But trust allows a group to divide labor, share risk, and preserve knowledge. If one individual brings food back instead of eating it alone, the group changes. If another cares for a child that is not their own, the group changes. If an injured member survives because others tolerate the cost of support, the group changes. Archaeologists sometimes find ancient individuals who lived with severe injury or disability long enough to heal, though each case must be interpreted carefully. Such remains do not prove compassion in a modern sentimental sense, but they suggest that care, tolerance, or social dependence could be part of prehistoric life in ways that simple survival stories often overlook. There is a surprising danger in cooperation. It creates opportunity for cheating. If food is shared, someone may take without giving. If warnings matter, someone may manipulate attention. If alliances protect, alliances can also exclude. A more social mind must therefore become a suspicious mind as well as a generous one. It must remember who helped, who failed, who lied, who returned, who disappeared when danger came. Moral life, in its earliest practical form, may begin here, not as written law, but as memory of behavior. The group carries a record inside its members. This social record may be older than language, but language will later make it far more powerful. Before words, however, reputation can still exist. A reliable individual is approached differently from a violent one. A skilled toolmaker draws attention. A good tracker becomes valuable. An elder with memory of old droughts may matter even when physically weaker. The human group begins to create roles, not formal offices, but patterned expectations. Some individuals know plants, some know stone. Some are watchful around predators. Some soothe children. Some notice weather. The modern mind will eventually turn such differences into status, story, ritual, and identity. But the roots lie in practical dependence. Around the fire, the social pressures become more concentrated, but they are present everywhere: at carcass, on a migration route, near a waterhole, inside a shelter, beside a sleeping child. Every place where humans gather becomes a school of attention. Young individuals watch not only how adults strike stone, but when they approach, when they wait, when they avoid conflict, when they share, when they remain silent. A child learns the emotional weather of the group long before understanding any formal rule. This is a lesser known but essential part of human evolution. Culture is not only tools and techniques, it is also the learned rhythm of living with others. The expanding social brain does not make early humans peaceful saints. Violence, rivalry, fear, and exclusion likely belong to the story too. The evidence for deep prehistoric conflict is uneven and often hard to interpret, but no serious view of human evolution can erase aggression. What makes humans unusual is not the absence of violence, but the coexistence of violence with care, competition with teaching, suspicion with loyalty, and self-interest with sacrifice. The mind must hold contradictions because the group itself is full of them. By the time human ancestors become deeply social toolmakers gathered around shared tasks and shared dangers, intelligence is no longer a private flame inside the skull. It is something that passes between faces. It lives in remembered debts, copied gestures, watched hands, exchanged food, protected children, and warnings understood before words. The modern human mind is being shaped by the need to belong to a creature more powerful than any single body the group. And once thought becomes social, it can begin to accumulate, because what one mind learns does not have to die with one mind alone. A mind that belongs to a group must also begin as something unfinished. This is one of the strangest facts about human beings. Compared with many animals, humans arrive in the world remarkably helpless. A newborn horse may stand within hours. A young antelope must move quickly or become part of the landscape's hunger. But a human infant is carried, fed, warmed, guarded, watched, and interpreted for years. Even after walking begins, the child remains dependent. Even after speech begins, the child still cannot survive alone. Childhood stretches long, fragile, expensive, and dangerous. Yet inside that vulnerability lies one of the most powerful engines in the creation of the modern human mind. The long human childhood is not simply a delay before adulthood. It is a vast learning field. A child has time to watch hands striking stone, bodies moving through dangerous terrain, elders choosing plants, adults reacting to distant sounds, and older children testing the edges of skill through play. The young human brain is not just waiting to become useful. It is absorbing a world too complex to inherit through instinct alone. Where to find water, which tracks matter, how to hold a tool, when to stay silent, whom to trust, what fear looks like on another face, how to read anger before it becomes violence. All of this must be learned slowly. This slow learning has deep biological costs. Children require food they do not gather, protection they cannot provide, and attention that adults might otherwise spend on themselves. Mothers carry especially heavy burdens, but human childhood likely depends on wider networks of carefathers, siblings, grandmothers, relatives, and other group members. Scholars still debate exactly how these caregiving systems developed in early human societies, and the evidence remains incomplete. But the pattern in our species is clear. Human young are raised not only by bodies but by communities of attention. A child survives because multiple minds make room for an unfinished one. That unfinished quality may be precisely the point. A brain born too rigidly prepared for one environment would struggle in a world of shifting climates, changing foods, dangerous migrations, and different social groups. Human young are born ready to learn rather than ready to know. Their minds remain open, plastic, hungry for patterns. This openness is risky because it means dependence lasts longer, but it also allows culture to enter the brain deeply. The child does not merely inherit genes. The child inherits gestures, routes, warnings, techniques, preferences, fears, and expectations. In this way, culture becomes almost like a second form of ancestry. One lesser-known detail is that children may have been important innovators, not only passive learners. Play is often treated as harmless surplus, something that happens when serious survival work pauses. But play allows young minds to experiment without immediate catastrophe. A child striking stones badly may discover a useful accident. A group of children imitating a hunt may rehearse coordination. A young person shaping mud, bone, fibre, or wood may test possibilities adults overlook. Play creates a space where the mind can loosen from strict necessity. It allows pretending, copying, exaggerating, practicing, and failing. These are not trivial behaviours. They are early training grounds for imagination. Imitation is another quiet revolution. Many animals learn by watching, but humans imitate with unusual intensity and precision. A child does not only copy the final result, a child often copies the sequence, even the unnecessary details, as if the method itself carries authority. In modern studies, children sometimes reproduce irrelevant steps when learning a task, a tendency that may seem inefficient, but it has a hidden strength. It preserves traditions faithfully. If a young toolmaker copies not only the obvious strike but also the posture, preparation, rhythm, and order of actions, then complex techniques can survive across generations before anyone fully understands why each part matters. Culture can accumulate because children are willing to copy more than they immediately need. This matters enormously for toolmaking. A stone tool tradition is not self-explanatory to an inexperienced eye. The useful edge appears only after controlled actions. The wrong stone may look promising and fail. The correct angle may be invisible until practiced. A young learner must watch again and again, then attempt, fail, adjust, and try once more. Adults may not teach in the formal sense familiar today, but even tolerating children nearby is significant. Letting them handle discarded flakes, observe butchery, follow foraging routes, and remain close to skilled makers allows knowledge to pass quietly. What survives in the record suggests tools, bodies, and learning formed one long system. Long childhood also changes emotional life. A creature dependent for years must be sensitive to caregivers. It must seek attention, interpret comfort, recognize anger, respond to approval, and learn from correction. Human children are emotional readers before they are skilled workers. They notice tone, face, posture, and rhythm. They learn what pleases the group and what threatens belonging. This creates minds tuned not only to the physical world, but to the social atmosphere surrounding every action. A child learns that knowledge is not neutral. It comes with approval, shame, pride, fear, patience, and belonging. The presence of children may also change adults. A group that must care for slow-growing young cannot live only in the immediate present. It must plan around nursing, carrying, teaching, sleeping places, food sharing, and protection. Camps may be chosen partly for safety. Food may be processed into forms children can eat. Fire may become more important because it warms infants and softens food. Older individuals may remain valuable because they hold knowledge that helps younger generations survive. No single explanation fully accounts for the emergence of extended human family life, but the needs of children likely pull the group into deeper cooperation. There is another hidden consequence. Because children learn from the world they are born into, each generation can begin slightly ahead of the last. An invention does not vanish if enough young people copy it. A route through dry country can be remembered after the original discoverer dies. A way of preparing food can become normal. A tool form can improve gradually. A warning about a dangerous place can persist. The mind, through childhood, becomes cumulative. Human beings do not have to reinvent humanity every generation. This accumulation is slow, uneven, and easily broken. Groups can disappear. Knowledge can be lost. a climate shift can scatter a population. A skilled elder can die before passing on a technique. The archaeological record shows gaps, regional differences, and long periods where change appears almost still. Progress is not a smooth ladder, yet the structure is in place dependent children, watchful adults, shared tasks, copied gestures, remembered places. Culture now has a vessel. By the time the human lineage carries long childhoods deep into prehistory, the making of the modern mind has become more than an anatomical process. It is a relationship between young and old, between patience and survival, between helplessness and inheritance. The child who cannot hunt today watches the hunt. The child who cannot make the tool studies the hand. The child who cannot explain fear learns the shape of fear on another face. Out of this long apprenticeship, the mind becomes able to hold not only personal memory but the memory of the group, and once that begins, human intelligence is no longer limited to what one life can discover. It becomes a river fed by generations. The child who learns slowly is born into a world that refuses to stay still. Across deep prehistory, the stage beneath human life keeps changing shape. Forests thicken, then thin, grasslands widen, then shrink, lakes fill basins that later become dust. Rivers cut through old sediments and abandon them. Coastlines move as ice grows and melts far away. Rains arrive for generations, then fail. The animals that once gathered in familiar places shift their ranges, vanish from old paths, or arrive in strange abundance. For early humans, the world is not a fixed map. It is a moving problem, and the mind must move with it. Climate does not shape humanity like a sculptor calmly shaping clay. It presses unevenly, violently at times, subtly at others. A dry century may change which plants survive. A wet phase may open green corridors through land that later becomes desert. Cooler periods may push populations toward refuges. Warmer periods may invite expansion into new territory. The evidence remains incomplete, and scholars still debate the exact role of climate in each major evolutionary turn. But the broad pattern is clear enough: human ancestors evolve in a world of instability. Their survival depends not only on strength or clever hands, but on flexibility. Flexibility is not the same as restlessness, though the two often travel together. A group does not leave a familiar place for romance or adventure. It moves because water fails, animals migrate, wood becomes scarce, conflict grows too costly, or a better opportunity appears beyond the next ridge. Movement is dangerous. New territory means unknown predators, unfamiliar plants, uncertain water, strange stone, different weather, and perhaps other human groups already living there. Yet staying can be dangerous too. A mind shaped in this world must compare risks that cannot be fully known. It must imagine a place not yet seen and judge whether memory, rumour, tracks, or seasonal change make movement worth the cost. This is a major threshold in the prehistoric journey of the mind, the ability to think geographically. A landscape is not just what lies before the eyes. It becomes a network of remembered places. Here is water after rain. There is stone that breaks cleanly. Beyond that ridge are animals in the cool months. That low ground floods. That cave gives shelter but may hold predators. That distant line of trees marks a river. These mental maps are not drawn on hide or bark, at least not in any form that survives from such ancient times. They are carried in memory, in routes walked repeatedly, in gestures toward the horizon, in the teaching of children, and eventually perhaps in stories that bind place to meaning. A lesser-known detail is that ancient climate change often creates opportunity as well as hardship. During some wetter periods, regions that are now harsh desert hold lakes, rivers, grasslands, and animals. The Sahara, for example, has not always been the endless dry barrier it appears to be in the modern imagination. At different times in prehistory, Parts of North Africa were far greener, with waterways and habitats that could support movement. Such shifts may have opened and closed routes for human populations. The planet itself seems to breathe, and human groups move through the changing openings. But every opening can become a trap. A lake that supports life for generations may shrink. A corridor that allows movement may close. A population that expands into favourable land may later find itself isolated by drought, ice, sea level, or ecological change. No single explanation fully accounts for the pattern of human dispersals, contractions, and survival. But climate repeatedly turns geography into a test of memory and adaptation. The mind must learn not only where things are, but how they change. This pressure may have favoured a mind capable of holding seasonal time. Many animals track seasons through instinct and experience, but humans increasingly live by learned calendars of behaviour. The ripening of fruit, the movement of herd animals, the nesting of birds, the flooding of rivers, the arrival of cold, the return of certain winds, each becomes part of a remembered order. A group that knows when to arrive at a place may survive better than one that arrives too late. Timing becomes knowledge, knowledge becomes tradition, tradition becomes a kind of invisible map laid over the land. Restless movement also brings encounters. Human groups that travel do not move through empty worlds. They meet predators, unfamiliar animals, new materials, and sometimes other human beings. These meetings may lead to avoidance, exchange, conflict, imitation, or interbreeding in later periods. Even before the great migrations of Homo sapiens, earlier humans and related species spread widely, showing that movement is deeply rooted in the human lineage. The mind that journeys must become alert to difference. What is safe in one valley may be dangerous in another. A plant known in one region may be absent in the next. A stone tool method useful with one raw material may fail with another. Adaptation requires not only memory, but the ability to revise memory. This is difficult because tradition can preserve life, but it can also trap the mind. A group may inherit a technique that works beautifully in one environment and poorly in another. A route remembered by elders may no longer lead to water. A hunting strategy shaped around one animal may fail when the herd moves away. The prehistoric mind must balance loyalty to inherited knowledge with openness to new evidence. Scholars still debate how flexible different human populations were at different times, and the archaeological record shows both long continuity and bursts of change. What survives suggests not a simple march toward innovation, but a constant tension between repeating what works and discovering what must change. Climate pressure may also deepen social memory. If droughts recur beyond a single lifetime, elders become valuable for what they remember from rare events. A young adult may never have seen a lake disappear, but an older person may recall where water remained decades earlier. In such moments, memory becomes survival at a scale larger than one season. The group's past becomes a tool. This is one of the quiet pathways toward the modern mind, the ability to treat remembered experience, even experience from another person's youth, as guidance for the present. As populations move, bodies change too. Different climates reward different strategies of clothing, shelter, diet, and cooperation. Cold demands insulation, fire, planning, and perhaps new forms of social dependence. Open country demands distance vision, endurance, and route knowledge. Coastal zones offer shellfish, fish, birds, and tidal rhythms, but require awareness of water, weather, and timing. Mountains, forests, wetlands, and drylands each train attention differently. The mind does not evolve in an abstract emptiness. It is educated by terrain. By this stage of the story, human ancestors are no longer merely reacting to danger beside a lake. They are becoming travellers through unstable worlds. Their hands carry tools. Their fires extend the night. Their children inherit knowledge. Their groups preserve memory. Now climate stretches that memory across space. The mind begins to imagine places beyond sight, seasons beyond the present, risks beyond the immediate threat. It becomes a moving archive, shaped by drought and rain, by vanished lakes and returning grass, by the old knowledge that the world can change beneath one's feet. And in a changing world, the most powerful mind is not the one that knows one answer, but the one that can survive when the answer changes. The moving human mind does not evolve alone. For a long time, the world is not inhabited by one kind of human, but by several. This is one of the most humbling truths to emerge from bones, tools, and ancient DNA. The modern human mind was not formed in an empty arena, waiting for the rest of nature to step aside. It arose in a crowded human landscape, a world of relatives close enough to resemble us, distant enough to remain mysterious, and intelligent enough to make the old idea of a single human ladder collapse into something far stranger. In Africa, the lineage that will eventually lead to Homo sapiens continues to change. But beyond Africa, other human forms are already making lives of their own. Neanderthals endure in Western Eurasia, shaped by cold lands, rugged terrain, powerful bodies, and long histories of adaptation. Denisovans, known at first from only tiny fragments of bone and tooth, leave genetic traces across Asia and into Oceania, revealing a population far more important than its physical remains once suggested. Other ancient humans also appear in the record Homo erectus, with its astonishingly long survival across parts of Africa and Eurasia, Homo floresiensis on an island world, Homo naledi in southern Africa, and perhaps still others represented by fossils too fragmentary to fit neatly into the family tree. The evidence remains incomplete, and scholars still debate how some of these groups relate to one another. But one thing is clear: humanity was once plural. This changes the story of the mind. If modern humans were the only intelligent human form, it would be easier to imagine the modern mind as a sudden, unique miracle. But Neanderthals make tools, control fire, hunt large animals, survive Ice Age climates, and occupy landscapes for hundreds of thousands of years. Denisovans, though still shadowy, adapt to high-altitude environments through genetic legacies that later help some modern human population survive in thin mountain air. Ancient humans are not failed drafts waiting for us to arrive. They are successful populations with their own histories, skills, and ways of inhabiting the world. Neanderthals especially force a reconsideration of what intelligence means. Their bodies are powerful, with broad chests, strong limbs, and faces adapted in ways still debated. Their brains are large, sometimes comparable in volume to those of modern humans. Though brain size alone does not reveal mental life, they make sophisticated stone tools, use adhesives, process hides, exploit varied foods, and in some places appear to use pigments, feathers, claws, or other materials that may carry symbolic meaning. Some Neanderthal remains suggest care for injured individuals who survive conditions that would have made life difficult, without group tolerance or support. Each case must be interpreted carefully, but the pattern resists any simple picture of them as brutish creatures living by instinct alone. Yet Neanderthals are not simply modern humans in heavier bodies. Their lives may have differed in tempo, social structure, childhood, range, population size, mobility, and perhaps communication. Scholars still debate the nature of Neanderthal language, symbolism, and imagination. The evidence remains incomplete because soft tissue, voices, gestures, and most daily objects vanish. What survives in the record suggests intelligence, but not necessarily identical intelligence. They may have known the world through traditions shaped by their own bodies, climates, dangers, and histories. Their minds were human, but not ours in any simple way. Denisovans deepen the mystery because they are known so unevenly. For years, they were almost ghosts of finger bone, teeth, genetic sequences, traces in living people, fragments from caves, hints across vast geography. Yet from these fragments emerges an astonishing possibility, a human population spread across enormous regions, interacting with both Neanderthals and Homo sapiens, and leaving a genetic inheritance still present today. A lesser known but remarkable detail is that one ancient individual identified from DNA had a Neanderthal mother and a Denisovan father, direct evidence that these human groups did not merely exist near one another in theory. They met closely enough to have children. The human world was interwoven. Such encounters must have carried consequences beyond genetics. Imagine modern humans entering a valley already known by another human group. The stone sources are used. The game trails are watched. Fires have burned in shelters before. The newcomers are not discovering empty land, they are entering someone else's memory. Meetings may be cautious, violent, brief, cooperative, or intimate. There may be imitation. There may be exchange of techniques. There may be avoidance across generations. No single explanation fully accounts for the relationships among these groups, and the record is too fragmentary to recover most encounters. But the existence of interbreeding alone proves that boundaries were not absolute. This matters for the modern mind because difference sharpens identity. A group that meets another human form must confront something deeply unsettling beings who are not animals, not strangers of the same kind in the ordinary sense, but familiar and unfamiliar at once. They make tools, they use fire, they know the land, they may communicate, they may threaten, they may attract, they may compete for the same caves, water, animals, and raw material. In such a world, the mind must classify carefully who is kin, who is rival, who can be watched, who can be learned from, who must be feared. The ancient human mind develops not only against nature, but in relation to other humanities. The eventual disappearance of these relatives remains one of the great unresolved shadows in prehistory. Neanderthals vanish as a distinct population sometime after modern humans expand deeper into their range. Denisovans disappear as a visible population too, though their genes survive in living descendants of encounters long past. Climate stress, small population sizes, competition, assimilation, disease, differences in social networks, and simple demographic absorption may all have played roles. Scholars still debate the balance. It is unlikely that one dramatic cause explains everything. Extinction in deep time is often less like a single blow and more like a narrowing corridor, fewer groups, fewer births, fewer safe places, fewer chances to recover. The unsettling part is that the winners do not remain untouched. Modern humans carry traces of Neanderthal and Denisovan ancestry. Our immune systems, adaptations, and biological variation still bear marks of those meetings. The modern mind, then, belongs to a body shaped partly by vanished relatives. We are not the pure replacement of other human forms. We are also, in a limited but real sense, their continuation. By the time Homo sapiens becomes the last surviving human species, the world has already held many human minds. Some made tools in cold valleys, some adapted to mountains, some lived on islands, some left only teeth, skull fragments, or DNA in sediment. Their disappearance makes our survival appear less inevitable. The modern human mind was not destined from the beginning to stand alone. It emerged from a crowded, fragile, experimental human world, where intelligence had many shapes, and where the final loneliness of our species came only after others had vanished into bone, stone, and the faint inheritance still moving silently inside us. If the world once held many human minds, then the deepest mystery is not only what those minds made, but how they reached one another. Stone can survive. Bone can survive. Ash can survive. A footprint can harden into mud and wait for a future species to notice it. But speech disappears the moment it is spoken. Gesture fades as soon as the hand lowers. A rhythm tapped on wood, a warning call shaped by breath, a soft sound used to calm a child, a shared signal before a hunt. Almost all of it vanishes without a trace. The modern human mind becomes powerful not simply because it thinks, but because it can send thought outward. Yet the earliest pathways of meaning are almost entirely missing from the record. Language is therefore one of the great hidden thresholds in prehistory. It is tempting to imagine a single moment when ancient humans suddenly begin to speak, as if silence breaks and the world fills with names. But this is almost certainly too simple. Communication must have deep roots in calls, facial expressions, posture, pointing, imitation, rhythm, and emotional sound. Other animals communicate richly. Primates warn, reconcile, threaten, beg, and bond. Birds learn songs. Whales exchange patterned calls. The difference with humans lies not in communication alone, but in the strange ability to build open-ended meaning to refer to absent things, combine ideas, share imagined possibilities, teach complex sequences, and bind memory into forms that outlive the moment. Scholars still debate when language in a modern sense emerged, and the evidence remains incomplete. There are no fossilized sentences. Anatomical clues help, but they do not settle the matter. The shape of the vocal tract, the position of the larynx, the control of breathing, the fine movement of the tongue and lips, the structure of the inner ear, and certain bones in the throat all offer hints. A small bone called the hyoid, which supports the tongue and helps with speech, has drawn attention because ancient human relatives show forms that can look surprisingly modern. But a hyoid bone alone does not prove language. A body may be capable of producing complex sounds without using them as humans do. The missing part is meaning. Genetics gives another partial clue. Changes involving genes related to speech and motor control, often discussed through FOXP2 and its wider networks, suggest that the biological foundations for spoken language reach deep into the human lineage and may have been shared in some form with Neanderthals. Yet genes are not grammar, and no single gene creates language. The modern speaking mind depends on breath control, hearing, memory, social learning, symbolic capacity, and the desire to communicate what is not immediately visible. No single explanation fully accounts for how all these pieces came together. Perhaps language grows first from the body. A hand points toward danger, a face tightens in fear, a hunter signals direction, a mother soothes with repeated sound, a group moves together through rhythm before it speaks in full sentences. Gesture may have played a central role, because the freed hands of upright walkers are already skilled at directing attention. A gesture can show where to look, how to strike, when to wait, whom to follow. But gesture has limits in darkness, at distance. Or when hands are occupied, sound travels where sight fails. A voice can warn from behind, call across brush, coordinate movement, or keep contact at night. Human language may have grown from the partnership of hand and voice, not from one replacing the other. The hearth likely deepens this partnership. Around fire, faces are visible and bodies are close. The day's events can be replayed through movement, sound, expression, and shared attention. A dangerous animal encountered earlier can be represented by gesture. A route can be indicated by pointing beyond the firelight. A failed hunt can become a lesson. A remembered water source can be held in the group's mind even when no one is standing beside it. What survives in the record suggests that early humans increasingly lived in worlds where knowledge had to travel from elder to child, from maker to learner, from scout to group, from one season to the next. A lesser known but important detail is that language may depend as much on listening as on speaking. Human hearing is tuned with unusual sensitivity to the range of sounds important for speech. To speak usefully, a group must also hear differences clearly, recognize patterns, and agree that a sound means one thing rather than another. The mind must become precise not only in producing signals, but in receiving them. A small difference in sound can eventually separate danger from safety. One person from another, one tool action from another, one memory from another. Listening becomes a form of shared discipline. Once meanings become stable, the world changes. A place can be named. A person can be called. A danger can be described before it appears. A tool sequence can be corrected. A child can learn not only by watching, but by being guided toward the important part of the action. The dead can be remembered. The absent can matter. A group can speak of tomorrow, of yesterday, of a herd beyond the ridge, of a storm from the last cold season, of a path known only through another person's memory. Language stretches the mind across time and space with a power no stone tool can match. But language also creates new burdens. A speaking mind can deceive more effectively. It can promise, exaggerate, accuse, blame, persuade, and remember insults. It can bind groups together, but it can also divide them. It can preserve knowledge, but it can preserve fear. It can turn practical memory into tradition, and tradition into obligation. The earliest language, whatever its form, was not simply a tool of beauty. It was a dangerous social force, because once thought can move between minds, it can reshape the group itself. By the time the modern human mind approaches its recognizable form, communication is no longer limited to immediate emotion or visible action. Meaning begins to travel through breath, gesture, rhythm, memory, and shared expectation. The record cannot tell us the first word, and perhaps there never was one. Instead, there may have been countless small crossings, a sound repeated until it became reliable, a gesture understood by more than one generation, a rhythm used to coordinate work, a warning remembered because it saved a life. Language before the record is like wind over ancient grass invisible now, but powerful enough to bend everything that followed. Once meaning begins to move between minds, it does not remain trapped in breath. It starts to cling to things. A shell is carried farther than it needs to be carried. A bone is marked with lines that do not help it cut or scrape. Red ochre stains skin, stone, hide, or the floor of a shelter. A tooth is pierced. A bead is worn. A dead body is treated in a way that seems to require attention beyond disposal. These traces are small, but they open one of the most difficult doors in the story of the modern human mind. They suggest that humans are beginning to live not only in a world of tools and dangers, but in a world of signs. Symbols are not ordinary objects. A stone edge does something directly. It cuts. A fire heats. A spear pierces. But a symbol works because a mind gives it meaning, and another mind recognizes that meaning. A bead may mark belonging. A pigment may signal identity, beauty, status, ritual, memory, or protection. An engraved line may count, decorate, guide, remember, or simply satisfy an aesthetic impulse. Scholars still debate the meanings of many early symbolic objects, and the evidence remains incomplete. A shell with a hole in it does not explain itself. A patch of pigment cannot tell us whether it was used for ceremony, body painting, hide preparation, medicine, insect repellent, or all of these at different times. Still, the repeated appearance of such objects across prehistoric sites suggests that human thought is entering a new kind of space. Ochre is one of the most evocative clues. This iron-rich mineral, often red or yellow, appears in many ancient contexts and sometimes seems to have been deliberately collected, ground, stored, and used. Red ochre can resemble blood, sunset, earth, or flesh. But modern associations should be handled carefully. The people who used it did not leave written explanations. What survives in the record suggests practical uses and symbolic possibilities intertwined. Ochre can colour the body, preserve hides, serve as an ingredient in adhesives, or mark surfaces. Its power may come partly from this very flexibility. It is useful, visible, transformable, and memorable. A hand covered in red pigment is not the same hand it was before. The act of carrying pigment matters almost as much as using it. If a group gathers ochre from a known source and transports it across distance, then the material has value beyond immediate survival. It is selected from the landscape and brought into social life. In some places, pieces of ochre show scraping or grinding marks, evidence of repeated preparation. This is not a passing accident. It suggests intention, habit, and perhaps tradition. A colour becomes part of human behaviour. Beads and ornaments deepen the mystery because they appear to speak socially. A shell worn on the body has no obvious use as a cutting tool or weapon. Its value lies in being seen. It may tell others something about the wearer group identity, age, alliance, skill, memory of a place, or participation in a shared custom. No single explanation fully accounts for early ornaments, and different groups may have used them differently. But once people decorate the body with objects that others can read, the body becomes a surface of communication. Identity is no longer only lived, it is displayed. This is a subtle but enormous step. In earlier parts of the journey, the human mind learns to read tracks, faces, stone, fire, weather, and social behaviour. Now minds begin to create things specifically to be read by other minds. A bead says something because people agree, consciously or not, that it says something. A pattern becomes more than a pattern. A colour becomes more than colour. This kind of shared meaning is fragile because it depends on culture, but it is also powerful. It allows a group to recognise itself. There is also a connection between symbols and memory. A marked object can hold attention after the maker is gone. It can remind, represent, or preserve a relationship to an event, person, place, or idea. Perhaps some marks record counting, seasons, or repeated acts. Perhaps some are decorative with meanings now lost. Perhaps some are the beginning of habits that later become art. The record does not allow certainty in many cases, but it does show that humans increasingly invest objects with significance beyond immediate function. The mind is learning to store meaning outside the body. Burials add another layer, though they are especially difficult to interpret. Not every ancient body placed in a pit proves belief in an afterlife. Practical disposal, protection from scavengers, emotional attachment, fear of the dead, ritual obligation, or social memory could all play roles. Some prehistoric burials include grave goods, pigments, careful positioning, or repeated use of particular places, while others are more ambiguous. Scholars still debate how far back deliberate burial extends and what it meant in different human groups. But the careful treatment of the dead suggests that a body can remain socially important after life has left it. That idea, however it is understood, marks a profound expansion of the mind. To remember the dead is to live with absence. An absent person can still matter. Their tools, body, place, or name may hold meaning. Even before clear religion appears, grief itself can reshape thought. A group that pauses over a body is doing something different from simply moving on. It is acknowledging a relationship that continues in memory. The dead cannot hunt, gather, teach, or warn, yet they may remain present in the emotional and symbolic world of the living. The modern human mind is built partly from this ability to treat absence as real. Symbols also allow groups to grow larger than direct familiarity. In small groups, everyone may know everyone by face, voice, and history. But as networks expand, visible signs can help mark trust or difference. Ornament, style, pigment, tool form, and repeated practices may signal who belongs to whom. This does not mean prehistoric people use symbols exactly as later tribes, nations, or religions do. That would be too simple. But the roots of their shared signs make social worlds wider, more stable, and more complex. They allow strangers or distant groups to recognize connection, or to recognize separation. The surprising thing is how modest many early symbols appear. They are not pyramids. They are not written tablets. They are shells, scratches, colours, bones, teeth, and stones. But the smallness is misleading. A pierced shell may represent a mental leap as great as any monument, because it shows that meaning can be detached from immediate survival and carried on the body. An engraved line may be quiet, but it shows that a hand can make a mark for the iron mind to return to. A patch of ochre may fade, but it reveals a world where humans begin changing appearances to change relationships. By this point in the prehistoric journey, the mind has crossed from practical intelligence into symbolic life. It still hunts, gathers, fears, hungers, and watches the weather. It still depends on stone, fire, children, memory, and the group. But now it also creates signs that hover above the material world. A shell is not just a shell. Red earth is not just earth. A body is not only a body. A mark is not only a mark. The human mind is beginning to live in two landscapes at once. The physical world of survival and the invisible world of shared meaning. From that second landscape, art, ritual, identity, and eventually history will grow. The first signs cling to portable things, shells, pigments, bones, teeth, marks small enough to fit in the hand. Then, much later in the long unfolding of the human mind, meaning expands onto stone walls deep inside the earth. A person enters a cave where daylight thins behind them, where the air cools, where sound changes, where the ordinary world of grass, wind, hunger, and weather falls away. The hand carries light. A flame trembles against limestone. Shadows move before the body does. And there, on the wall, an animal appears. It is not a living animal, yet it is not merely stone. A bison curves out of the rock as if its back has been waiting inside the surface. A horse stretches forward with impossible stillness. A mammoth, a lion, a rhinoceros, a deer, or an aurochs emerges from pigment and line, sometimes placed so carefully that the natural bulges of the cave become shoulder, belly, flank, or muscle. The artist does not simply decorate an empty surface. The artist sees form inside stone and brings it forward. This is one of the most astonishing clues to the prehistoric mind, the ability to recognize hidden possibility, not only in a stone core that can become a tool, but in a cave wall that can become a living image. Ice Age cave art does not begin human imagination, but it makes imagination visible on a scale that still feels startling. The people who create these images are fully human, yet their world is not ours. They live among animals now extinct or transformed in range. They know cold, migration, hunger, seasonal movement, and the delicate dependence of small groups on knowledge passed through generations. Their tools are stone, bone, antler, wood, hide, fibre, and fire. Their nights are dark in a way modern people rarely experience, and still they enter difficult spaces, sometimes crawling or moving far from natural light, to make images where no practical daily work seems to require them. Scholars still debate why cave art was made, and the evidence remains incomplete. Theories have ranged from hunting magic to teaching, storytelling, initiation, shamanic experience, social memory, territorial identity, aesthetic expression, and ritual practice. Some popular explanations imagine a single secret meaning behind every animal, but this is almost certainly too simple. These images were created across wide regions and long periods, by different groups facing different histories. No single explanation fully accounts for them all, yet the care, difficulty, and repetition involved suggest that these images mattered deeply. One of the most striking details is where some of the art appears. Many images are not placed at cave entrances where they would be easy to see in daily life. Some are deep within chambers, down narrow passages, or in places that require effort and risk to reach. This means the act of going there may have been part of the meaning. A cave is not an ordinary room. It is a hidden landscape beneath the landscape, a place of darkness, echo, mineral smell, dripping water, strange formations. An unstable footing. Entering it with flame turns perception into something uncertain. Walls seem to breathe. Shadows animate the animals. A painted horse may shift when the fire moves. The cave itself becomes an active participant. The handprints are especially intimate. Some are made by placing a hand against the wall and blowing pigment around it, leaving a negative shape the absence of the hand preserved as an image. Others are painted directly. Many belong to adults, some possibly to adolescents or children, and studies have debated the sex and age of handmakers. Though such interpretations are not always secure, what matters is the gesture. A hand touches stone, pigment surrounds it, and a human presence remains. It is not a portrait of a face. It is something more direct and more mysterious, a mark that says a body was here. A mind reached this wall. A living hand briefly met deep time. The animals often dominate the caves, and their presence reveals how intensely Ice Age people knew the non-human world. These are not childish drawings. Many show careful observation of posture, movement, anatomy, and behaviour. The curve of a neck, the mass of a shoulder, the tension of a leg, the lowered head of an animal in motion, such details suggest long familiarity. Humans depended on animals for food, hide, bone, antler, sinew, danger, and wonder. To draw them was not to draw distant scenery. It was to engage with powers at the centre of life. Yet humans themselves are often rare, partial, ambiguous, or strange in cave art. This imbalance is surprising. The artists are human, but the walls are filled with animals. Perhaps animals held greater symbolic force. Perhaps the images relate to hunting, spirit worlds, seasonal cycles, or stories now lost. Perhaps human identity was defined partly through relationship with animals, not separation from them. The evidence remains incomplete. But what survives suggests that the prehistoric mind did not see nature as a background. It saw animal life as a powerful presence with which human life was entangled. Cave art also shows memory becoming collective. A painted chamber may be visited again. New marks may be added near old ones. Later artists may respect, modify, ignore, or overlap earlier images. In some caves, different phases of activity suggest long histories of return. A wall becomes a place where generations meet without seeing one another. The first maker may be dead, but the image remains. A child brought into the cave may see animals created before their birth. The group's imagination becomes stored in place. There is a technical side to this wonder. Pigments must be gathered and prepared. Lamps may require fat and wicks. Scaffolding or awkward body positions may be needed for certain images. Tools are used to engrave, scrape, outline, shade, and spray. Some artists understand how to use the texture of stone, how to create volume with limited means, how to place images in relation to cracks and curves. The cave wall awakens not by accident, but through skill. This is art, but it is also planning. Material knowledge, bodily control, and social purpose. By the time humans paint in caves, the modern mind has become a chambered thing itself. It holds memory, technique, symbol, fear, beauty, animal knowledge, social meaning, and a sense of presence beyond the immediate moment. In the flicker of firelight, the ancient achievements from earlier in the journey come together. The upright body carries flame into darkness. The skilled hand uses prepared pigment. The social mind enters a place meaningful to others. The symbolic mind makes a mark that stands for more than itself. The child who learns slowly may one day return as the maker. The group that survives climate and hunger leaves behind not only tools, but visions. And still, the cave does not fully explain itself. It gives images, not translations. It shows animals, hands, signs, and shadows, but not the voices that once moved through the dark. The mystery remains part of its power. What survives on the walls suggests that the human mind had learned to do something extraordinary, to enter darkness and create a world there. One that was not exactly memory, not exactly dream, not exactly record, and not merely decoration. It was a second life made of line, colour, stone, and flame. In that hidden life, the modern human imagination becomes visible. The painted cave is not the end of the journey inward, it is also a sign of movement outward. By the time human imagination is leaving animals on stone walls, Homo sapiens has already begun one of the most consequential expansions in the history of life. Small groups move beyond the African landscapes where their species first takes shape, carrying with them bodies adapted by deep ancestry and minds increasingly loaded with tools, memories, symbols, roots, fire, and social knowledge. They do not move as conquerors in any simple sense. They move as vulnerable people entering worlds colder, wider, stranger, and more dangerous than anything their ancestors had known. The story of these migrations is not a single heroic march. It is uneven, interrupted, and complicated. Populations move out, some vanish, some retreat, some leave little or no trace, and others become ancestors of later peoples. Coastlines that once carried camps and pathways are now drowned beneath rising seas. Deserts that were once passable become barriers. Ice sheets open and close routes, genetic evidence, archaeology, fossils, and climate records all help reconstruct the picture. But the evidence remains incomplete. Scholars still debate the timing and paths of different movements, especially the earlier dispersals that may not have led directly to most living populations. What survives suggests not one departure, but repeated attempts by a restless and adaptable species. Leaving Africa does not mean leaving humanity's past behind. The migrants carry old skills into new settings, stone tool traditions, fire use, social learning, perhaps symbolic practices, and the capacity to read landscapes quickly. But new lands demand new answers. In the Levant, open corridors connect Africa and Eurasia during favourable periods. But those corridors can close under harsher climates. Farther north and east, colder zones require clothing, shelters, fuel knowledge, and careful seasonal planning along coasts, tides, shellfish, fish, seabirds, and marine mammals offer opportunities to those who understand rhythm of water. In forests, visibility changes. In steppe country, distance and wind dominate. In mountains, thin air and rugged passage test the body. The modern mind proves powerful not because it carries one perfect solution, but because it can keep making new ones. This is where culture becomes a survival system. A human body without tools is poorly prepared for freezing nights, long winters, or the pursuit of large Ice Age animals. But a human group with needles, scrapers, hides, fire, shelters, stored knowledge, and planned cooperation can become something different. Clothing is not merely covering, it is portable climate. Shelter is not merely a place to sleep, it is a constructed boundary between the body and weather. Fire is not merely warmth, it is a centre around which cold lands become habitable. The mind begins to wrap the body in invention. A lesser known but important part of this expansion is how much of it may have followed vanished edges of the world. During lower sea levels, coastlines extend farther out than they do today. People moving along shores may have used resources from beaches, reefs, estuaries, and river mouths that are now underwater. This means some of the most important evidence for early movement may lie beyond easy reach, drowned by the very climate changes that later reshaped the planet. The map available to archaeologists is not the map those people walked. Much of their world has been erased by the sea. As humans enter Eurasia, they encounter other human populations. Neanderthals already know many of the western landscapes. Denisovans and related groups occupy parts of Asia. These meetings are among the most mysterious episodes in prehistory. There is interbreeding, proved by ancient DNA and by traces still present in many living people. But genetics cannot tell the whole story. It cannot show whether a meeting began with fear, curiosity, violence, exchange, hunger, attraction, or accidental proximity at a water source. It cannot show whether tools were copied, whether roots were learned, whether children of mixed ancestry grew between worlds of tradition. No single explanation fully accounts for what happened when these different humans met. Yet the encounters remind us that the modern human journey was never purely solitary. Moving into new worlds also means entering new relationships with animals. In Ice Age Eurasia, humans share landscapes with mammoths, woolly rhinoceroses, cave lions, giant deer, bison, horses, reindeer, and predators capable of killing a person quickly. These animals are not simply scenery. They are food, danger, material, memory, and eventually image. Hunting large animals requires planning, knowledge of behavior, cooperation, and courage. But it also requires restraint. A failed hunt can injure or kill. A successful hunt can feed many. The mind must learn to think in groups, terrain, wind direction, animal movement, and timing. It must know when not to attack. In some regions, humans adapt to extreme cold with astonishing skill. They make fitted clothing from hides, use bone and antler technologies, build shelters from available materials, and maintain social networks across difficult landscapes. In other regions, they use caves, rock shelters, open-air camps, river valleys, and coasts. Their lives are not uniform. The phrase Ice Age people can hide enormous variation. Some groups live near glaciers, others live in warmer refuges. Some depend heavily on large herd animals, others gather plants, fish, shellfish, small game, birds, or seasonal foods. What survives in the record suggests flexibility rather than a single Ice Age way of life. Eventually, humans reach lands no earlier hominin is known to have occupied. They move into Sahul, the combined Ice Age landmass of Australia and New Guinea, requiring sea crossings even at lower sea levels. This is a profound sign of planning, whether by deliberate voyaging, island hopping, or movements whose exact nature remains debated. Water crossings demand courage and knowledge beyond ordinary walking. They require people to imagine land beyond the visible or to follow chains of islands into uncertainty. Later, humans enter the Americas, though the timing, routes, and details remain subjects of active debate. They may travel through interior corridors when possible, along Pacific coastal routes, or through combinations of movement shaped by ice, sea level, and ecology. The broad result is extraordinary. One species, born in Africa, becomes present across much of the planet. Yet expansion is not only triumph. As humans enter new ecosystems, consequences follow. Some large animals eventually disappear, especially near the end of the Ice Age, and the roles of climate change, human hunting, habitat shifts, and ecological stress remain debated. It is too simple to blame humans alone everywhere, and too simple to remove them entirely. The modern mind is becoming powerful enough to alter the worlds it enters, but often without full awareness of the scale of change. Intelligence does not guarantee wisdom, it only increases reach. By the end of these crossings, the human mind has proven itself portable. It can leave familiar rivers, follow coasts now drowned, meet other human forms, endure cold, cross water, learn new animals, and carry meaning into unfamiliar skies. The journey that began with attention in a dangerous landscape now stretches across continents. Wherever humans go, they bring more than bodies. They bring remembered fire, taught hands, watched faces, hidden symbols, and the ability to imagine a place before arriving there. In that ability, the modern mind becomes not only a product of the world, but a force moving through it. The farther humans move, the more the mind must learn to carry what the body cannot. A person can carry a blade, a child, a bundle of hides, a shell ornament, a burning ember if conditions allow. But no one can carry a whole landscape in their hands. No one can lift a migration route, a dangerous river crossing, a season of hunger, the memory of a vanished herd, or the lesson of a winter when the wrong shelter nearly killed everyone. These things must be carried another way. They must live in attention, in repeated action, in gesture, in sound, in imitation, in warning, in story before writing, and in the quiet authority of people who remember. This is where memory becomes tradition, and tradition becomes one of the great hidden machines of human survival. A single memory is fragile. It belongs to one nervous system, one aging body, one life that can be ended by infection, childbirth, hunger, accident, violence, cold, or a predator's sudden movement at dusk. But when memory is shared, repeated, and taught, it becomes harder to destroy. A route known by one person may vanish when that person dies. A route known by a group can survive for generations. A way to shape stone, prepare hide, avoid poisonous plants, track reindeer, read tides, find water under dry conditions, or preserve embers through a wet night can become more than knowledge. It becomes custom. People do it because others before them did it, and because doing it has kept the group alive. This is not tradition in the later ceremonial sense only, though ceremony may eventually grow from it. It is tradition as lived repetition, the correct way to hold a tool, the right season to visit a valley, the preferred stone source, the dangerous marsh, the place where the ice breaks, the animal behavior that means a herd is about to turn, the sound that gathers children close, the gesture that signals silence, the order in which tasks are done around a kill, the pattern of sharing that prevents anger from tearing the group apart. These are not written laws, but they govern life with a force that may be just as real. What survives in the record suggests that prehistoric people often maintained habits over long stretches of time. Tool forms can remain recognizable across many generations. Certain places are returned to again and again. Materials are transported across distance. Pigments, ornaments, and repeated marks hint at shared meanings. Yet the evidence remains incomplete, because tradition is mostly made of behavior, and behavior usually disappears. Archaeologists find the stone left after the lesson. Not the lesson itself. They find the shell bead, not the moment when a child learns why it matters. They find the hearth, not the remembered rule about who tends it. Still, the traces are enough to show that the human mind is no longer limited to immediate problem solving. It is becoming historical, even before history exists. A person acts in a certain way because of what happened before their birth. A child learns a method from an elder who learned it from another elder, who may have learned it from someone whose bones are already part of the earth. In this way, the dead begin to guide the living, not only through burial or grief, but through technique. Every inherited skill is a small survival of vanished minds. There is a surprising tension inside this process. Tradition preserves, but it can also resist change. A group that repeats a successful method gains stability. A group that repeats an outdated method may suffer when the environment changes. During deep climate shifts, a route that once led to water may become useless. A hunting strategy that worked for one animal may fail when another becomes more common. A tool form suited to one raw material may not work well with another. Scholars still debate how flexible different prehistoric groups were in the face of such changes. But no single explanation fully accounts for the uneven rhythm of innovation in the archaeological record. Sometimes change appears slow, almost stubborn. Sometimes it arrives in bursts. The modern human mind grows inside this tension between loyalty and invention. It must respect the old ways because the old ways contain tested survival. But it must also notice when the world has altered. The most successful mind is not simply the most creative or the most obedient. It is the one that knows when memory should be followed and when memory must be revised. This balance may be one of the hardest human abilities, and it remains difficult even now. Tradition also changes the meaning of age. In many animals, physical strength and fertility dominate value. In human groups, older individuals can remain important because they hold rare memory. They may know drought, sickness, conflict, migration, animal behavior, plant cycles, weather signs, and social history. An elder may no longer be the fastest walker or strongest hunter, but the group may still depend on what they have seen. A child listening to such memory receives a world larger than personal experience. This does not mean every prehistoric elder was honoured equally, or that ancient life was gentle toward age. The evidence remains incomplete. But the human capacity to value remembered knowledge gives age a new kind of power. Story likely becomes one of the strongest vessels for this power. Not written story, not polished literature, but spoken or gestured memory shaped so it can be remembered. A dangerous place becomes attached to an event. An animal's behaviour becomes attached to a warning, a star pattern, a river bend, a mountain shape, a season of hunger, a successful crossing, a death, a birth, a betrayal, a rescue. All can be held in forms that travel from mouth to ear, from gesture to watching eyes. From night fire to night fire, even when details change, the structure carries meaning forward. This may be where practical knowledge and symbolic life begin to weave together. A route is not only a route if it is tied to ancestors. A hunting practice is not only technique if it is surrounded by rule, song, taboo, or ritual. An ornament is not only decoration if it marks belonging to people who share the same remembered past. The human mind does not separate function and meaning as neatly as modern categories suggest. For prehistoric people, survival knowledge may be emotional, social, and sacred all at once. By now, intelligence has become something larger than any one skull. It lives in bodies, objects, places, and repeated acts. It is stored in scars on stone cores, in the placement of camps, in the careful making of clothing, in the memory of drowned coasts, in the return to painted caves, in the small rules that keep food sharing from becoming violence. A person born into such a world inherits not only genes, but a library without pages. The shelves are made of people. The books are made of habits. The ink is memory. And this is one of the quiet miracles of the prehistoric journey. The modern human mind is not only a mind that thinks, it is a mind that receives thought from before, changes it slightly, and passes it on. It can live in the present while carrying a past it never personally saw. It can prepare a child for a danger that happened to a grandparent. It can turn experience into tradition, and tradition into a map through uncertainty. Long before writing, long before kings, long before temples or cities, humanity has already invented a way for memory to outlive the individual. In that invention, the mind becomes deeper than one lifetime. By the time memory becomes tradition, the human mind is no longer only adapting to the earth. It is beginning to alter it, not with cities, not with ploughs, not with walls of fired brick or canals cut by organised states, but with smaller and older powers fire carried across dry ground, hunters planning around animal movement, shelters built where no shelter stood before, clothing stitched from skins, stone transported from distant sources, camps returned to season after season, and knowledge laid over the land like an invisible net. Long before farming, humans are already changing the worlds they enter. The change is uneven, often local, sometimes accidental, but it is real. This is a difficult part of the story because the scale is easy to misunderstand. Prehistoric hunter-gatherers do not transform the planet in the way later agricultural societies do. They do not clear continents with iron axes or drive herds behind fences or build cities that glow through the night. Many groups live with deep knowledge of animal behaviour, plant cycles, weather, water, and seasonal movement. Their survival often depends on careful attention rather than reckless domination. Yet it would also be wrong to imagine them as beings who leave no mark. A mind capable of planning, remembering, cooperating, and using fire does not pass through a landscape like a shadow, it leaves patterns. Fire is one of the oldest ways the mind reaches outward. A natural wildfire burns where lightning and dry fuel allow it. Human-used fire can be different. It can be placed, repeated, timed, and carried. In some environments, burning encourages fresh plant growth, opens travel routes, drives animals, reduces dangerous underbrush, or shapes the availability of certain foods. Scholars still debate the antiquity, frequency, and ecological impact of deliberate landscape burning in many regions. And the evidence remains incomplete. Charcoal in sediment can point to fire, but not always to human intention. Still, what survives in the record suggests that human fire use eventually becomes more than warmth and cooking. It becomes a way of negotiating with vegetation, animals, and space. A small fire can change a camp. Repeated fires can change a place. Over generations, selected campsites accumulate ash, bone fragments, broken tools, plant remains, and the memory of return. The ground itself begins to hold human presence. A shelter under rock becomes familiar. A river bend becomes a butchery place. A cave becomes a chamber of images or repeated occupation. A ridge becomes a lookout. These places are not cities, yet they are not untouched wilderness either. They are landscapes with human habits pressed into them. Hunting systems show the same outward reach of the mind. To kill a large animal safely often requires more than a strong arm. It requires knowledge of wind, terrain, herd movement, animal fear, escape routes, season, weapon performance, and group coordination. A drive hunt, whether simple or elaborate, depends on predicting what animals will do before they do it. Humans use cliffs, marshes, snow, narrow valleys, river crossings, or natural traps. They wait, signal, surround, frighten, guide, and strike. The animal's body becomes food, but also hide, sinew, bone, antler, fat, and memory. A successful hunt can feed many people. A failed one can leave injury, hunger, or death. The mind is now planning not just a tool, but an event involving bodies, animals, landforms, and timing. There is a surprising sophistication in this kind of planning. It does not always leave monuments, but it requires a mental map of action. One person must know where another will stand. The group must understand when to move and when to wait. The hunters must imagine the herd's fear before the herd reacts. They must know the difference between a useful panic and a dangerous chaos. Such hunting does not prove that every prehistoric group lived the same way. And not all relied heavily on large animals. But where the evidence supports coordinated hunting, it shows minds capable of turning landscape into strategy. Shelters and clothing push this strategy further. A shelter is a thought made physical. It says that the body will remain here against wind, cold, rain, insects, snow, or sun. It requires selecting materials, arranging space, and sometimes returning to repair or reuse what has been made. Clothing is even more intimate. A hide scraped, softened, cut, pierced, sewn, wrapped, or fitted becomes an artificial skin. Bone needles and hide-working tools hint at lives in which the body is extended by craft. Cold climates, in particular, demand planning at a level that cannot be improvised at the moment of freezing. Warmth must be prepared before the cold becomes lethal. This is where the modern mind begins to remake the body's limits. Humans do not grow fur thick enough for Ice Age winters. They make insulation. They do not develop claws for cutting. They carry blades. They do not become nocturnal predators. They bring fire into the dark. They do not evolve natural armor against weather. They build shelters. Culture becomes a second body, one that can change faster than anatomy. This is one of the great consequences of the prehistoric mind. It allows survival to move partly outside the slow pace of biological evolution. Cooperation makes all of this more powerful. A single person can make a tool or tend a flame, but a group can move stone, share food, maintain children, preserve roots, surround animals, protect the injured, and remember more than one person could hold alone. The group becomes a living technology. Its strength lies not only in numbers, but in coordinated difference one watches, one carries, one teaches, one cuts, one gathers fuel, one knows plants, one calms a child. One remembers the old route. The evidence remains incomplete, but what survives suggests that human survival increasingly depends on distributed knowledge. The consequences reach beyond human camps. When humans enter new lands, some animals encounter a predator unlike others, one that plans collectively, attacks at distance, uses fire, learns quickly, and passes successful strategies to the next generation. Near the end of the Ice Age, many large animals disappear in different parts of the world. Climate change is a major force, reshaping habitats, vegetation, and water systems. Human hunting and disturbance may also contribute in some regions. Scholars still debate the balance, and no single explanation fully accounts for every extinction. But the timing of human arrival in certain places, combined with ecological stress, suggests that the modern mind has become an ecological force before it ever becomes agricultural. That is the unsettling legacy of this stage. Intelligence expands reach before it fully understands consequence. A group may burn land for immediate benefit without imagining centuries of vegetation change. Hunters may follow animals successfully without knowing whether herds can recover under new pressures. People may move into island ecosystems where animals have no memory of human danger. None of this requires cruelty. It requires only effective minds acting locally in fragile worlds. And so the prehistoric journey approaches a turning point. Human beings are still foragers, still vulnerable to drought, hunger, sickness, injury, and cold. They still sleep close to fire and depend on the patience of children and the memory of elders. Yet they are no longer merely inhabitants of nature. They are makers of niches, carriers of climates, planners of hunts, keepers of flame, builders of temporary worlds. Long before fields and kingdoms, the modern mind begins to press its shape into earth, animal movement, vegetation, and memory. The planet has not yet become human, but it has begun to feel the presence of a creature that can imagine what is not there, make it, and then live inside the change. The world has now been changed by a mind that took millions of years to form, and yet the mystery at the centre of that mind remains unfinished. It is tempting to look backward and arrange the story into a neat ascent, upright walking, freed hands, stone tools, fire, social life, childhood, migration, language, symbols, art, tradition, and then the power to reshape the earth. But prehistory doesn't unfold like a staircase built for human arrival. It is rougher, stranger, more wasteful, and more uncertain. Many human relatives vanish. Many populations leave no descendants. Many inventions may appear, disappear, and reappear in different places. Some lines of evidence glow brightly for a moment, then break off into darkness. The modern human mind is not the result of one clean breakthrough. It is a long accumulation of fragile advantages, each one depending on bodies, landscapes, other minds, and chance. What survives in the record suggests that the mind we carry today was assembled from many older abilities. Attention came first, sharpened by danger. Memory deepened as landscapes changed. Hands learned to hold possibilities. Stone taught sequence. Fire gathered the group and stretched life into the night. Social life trained the brain to read faces, debts, alliances, and moods. Childhood opened a long passage for learning. Climate forced flexibility. Encounters with other human forms revealed that intelligence had more than one shape. Language, however, emerged, allowed thought to travel. Symbols gave meaning a body outside the body. Cave art made imagination visible in darkness. Tradition allowed the dead to continue teaching the living. And finally, culture became a second skin, letting humans survive in places their bare bodies could not easily endure. Yet every part of this story contains uncertainty. Scholars still debate when controlled fire became habitual, how complex Neanderthal language may have been, why symbolic objects appear unevenly across regions, how much early art was ritual, teaching, memory, or something else entirely, and why Homo sapiens alone remained after a world of many human forms. The evidence remains incomplete because the most important things are often the least likely to fossilize. Breath vanishes. Gesture vanishes. Fear vanishes. A child's first successful imitation vanishes. A remembered route vanishes unless it leaves tools, bones, or marks along the way. The archaeological record is not the past itself. It is the small surviving edge of an enormous vanished life. This should make the story smaller, but somehow it makes it larger. The missing evidence reminds us that the human mind was not created only in spectacular moments. It was made in ordinary acts repeated beyond counting watching clouds, carrying fuel, calming children, waiting beside a carcass, choosing stone, recognizing a familiar footprint, sharing food with someone who might one day share in return, remembering where water lasted when other places failed. The extraordinary grew from the ordinary because the ordinary continued for hundreds of thousands of years. The final mystery is not whether prehistoric humans were intelligent. They clearly were. The deeper mystery is how intelligence became cumulative, symbolic, emotional, social, and restless all at once. A crow can solve a puzzle, a chimpanzee can use a tool, a wolf can cooperate, an elephant can remember, a whale can communicate across distance. Humans are not separated from the living world by magic. The modern mind is made from abilities that have roots across life. But in our lineage, those abilities became bound together with unusual intensity. Memory joined teaching. Teaching joined childhood. Childhood joined culture. Culture joined language. Language joined imagination. Imagination joined the power to alter environments. The result was a creature able not only to survive a world, but to carry worlds inside its head. That power is beautiful and dangerous. The same mind that paints a horse in a cave can plan a hunt that empties a valley. The same mind that cares for an injured companion can sharpen a weapon against a rival. The same mind that remembers ancestors can invent boundaries between groups. The same mind that turns fire into warmth can turn fire into landscape change. Nothing in prehistory suggests that the modern human mind was ever purely noble or purely destructive. It was always mixed. Tender and violent, careful and reckless, imaginative and afraid. Its greatness lies partly in its contradictions. Inside every modern person, traces of this journey remain, not as clear memories, but as inheritances. The quick reading of a face, the comfort of firelight, the pull of a story, the urge to decorate the body, the fear of darkness, the need to belong, the ability to imagine tomorrow with dread or hope, the strange feeling that a place can hold memory, the habit of seeing meaning in marks, the ache left by the dead. These are not accidents floating above biology. They are echoes of the long road by which the mind became human. And perhaps that is why the prehistoric mind still feels mysterious. It is distant enough to be almost alien, yet close enough to be intimate. The people who made early tools, carried ochre, crossed drowned coasts, entered caves, and watched animals in firelight did not know they were creating the future. They were trying to live. They were hungry, cold, observant, frightened, patient, grieving, playful, and skilled. They didn't march toward modernity. They moved through their own present, one uncertain day at a time, but in doing so, they opened the mental world we still inhabit. The modern human mind, then, is not a finished monument. It is an unfinished inheritance. It still carries ancient strength that can save us, and ancient impulses that can endanger us. It can imagine beyond the horizon, but it can also fear strangers beyond that horizon. It can preserve memory, but it can also distort it. It can cooperate at astonishing scales, yet still fracture over symbols, stories, and belonging. The journey that began in deep prehistory has not ended. It continues wherever human beings learn, remember, make, destroy, repair, mourn, and wonder. The old landscape is gone, but the ancient traveller remains inside us, still watching the grass move, still listening in the dark, still trying to understand what kind of creature it has become. The long story softens here, not because the mystery is solved, but because the trail disappears into the quiet places where evidence can no longer follow. There is no final cave wall that explains the first word. There is no last stone tool that proves when imagination became fully human. There is no single skull that contains the whole answer. There are only traces, scattered across deserts, caves, riverbeds, islands, frozen valleys, drowned coasts, and the living body itself. Across that immense distance, the ancient world grows still again. The fires burn low. The painted animals remain in darkness. The old camps are covered by dust, forest, ice, water, or cities that rise much later without knowing what lies beneath them. The people are gone, but not entirely. Some part of them remains in the way a hand reaches for another hand, in the way a child watches closely, in the way a story holds a room, in the way a mark on a surface can summon a memory from nothing. The mind that crossed prehistory was never separate from the earth. It was shaped by stone, hunger, weather, predators, rivers, children, elders, animals, and night. It learned slowly that the world could be remembered. Then it learned that the world could be changed. Then, perhaps most strangely, it learned that the world could be imagined before it existed. And that is the image that lingers not a king, not a city, not a monument, but a small group at the edge of the dark, gathered close to a weakening fire. Beyond them, the land is vast and dangerous. Above them, stars move in silence. Around them, children sleep, tools wait, embers pulse, and somewhere inside their watchful minds, the future is beginning without a name.